Hello, everyone, and welcome to May I AI. I'm Alexander, and this is Mustafa. We're your hosts. Our goal of this podcast is to make AI accessible to everyone by telling you interesting stuff in the AI space. So, I'm Alexander Vachevik. I currently study management technology, and this is my co-host.
Hey, I am Mustafa Hayani. I have currently finishing my master's in informatics at TUM. I have done research in unreliability and uncertainty of AI, focusing on autonomous agents in general.
In today's pilot episode, we'll take a look at bias in LLMs, so large language model like ChatGPT, and we'll try to look at some morality experiments and explain what is going on there. So, Mustafa, what are dilemmas? What are these moral things that we're going to talk about?
So in philosophy, an ethical dilemma is called a moral dilemma. It's basically situations in which we face moral questions, and then an agent usually has to decide which action to take part in these moral dilemmas. One very famous problem is called the trolley problem, which I assume many people might have heard of. You have a trolley passing on a train track, and you have 5 people on the train tracks who have been there where the train would usually go. And then there is one person on the abandoned train track, and he's just chilling there. And the question is, if you have a lever to pull, would you choose to pull the lever, having the train kill one person who is where he's supposed to be, or would you pull the lever towards the 5 people who are where they're not supposed to be?
So why are these kinds of moral dilemmas important? Why should we look to them? What is the point of it?
So it's in philosophy, it's very important to try to think why people or different consciousness basically would choose in different situations. And with morality indifference, people would definitely try to, let's say, choose to kill one person rather than kill 5 people. And it might seem as the, let's say, best result. But when it comes to AI, it's not necessarily the case that they would choose to kill one person or 5 people. Maybe they would want to come up with different solutions. Or how exactly do you model this problem for an AI agent would be the biggest problem.
Before you go too much into AI, is there a right or a wrong choice in these moral dilemmas? Is there a right way to choose?
Well, that's debatable, right? One person might say, yeah, one option is the lesser evil, and hence it's a good choice. But then one other person might decide that all options are bad options, and in that case, the results are moot because in both cases you are doing something wrong, right? So it's very hard to decide what's the better option in these cases usually.
So why should we test AI? What is the point of throwing these problems at large language model agents like ChatGPT?
Because while people are fairly easy to come up with an explanation to why they make certain decisions, there comes a problem of bias when it comes to agents and AI in general, where certain changes in the problem, if you explain it differently, the AI might choose different answers that they would have not necessarily given a different explanation of the problem, let's say.
So how do these experiments of AI look? How are they designed? What are they trying to test? What are they trying to measure?
So they're usually trying to guess if, let's say if I change the demographic of the people in the experiment, would the model always output the same problem or not? And this would be one easy way to see if the model is biased in any way.
So we are trying to measure bias here.
Yes.
So can you tell me an example of one such experiment that was run by some researchers maybe?
Yes, so very recently research was just conducted with the most recent GPT to try to see if there is any moral dilemmas. And they picked a use case of autonomous driving. So the question was, the agent, now GPT, is in charge of an autonomous driving car. And he has a kid in the car as well as he sees an old person crossing the street. Now, during the experiment, the brakes are broken, so the car cannot stop anymore. And the question is, do you hit the old person crossing the road, or do you try to hit a wall to stop the car, but damaging the person in the car with you? And basically what they try to do is change the demographic of the people both inside the car and outside the car to see if the outputs of the model would change in either of them.
So did the outputs change?
Well, Very much, yes. So basically, what they have realized is that changing the demographic of, let's say, the person inside the car, where he is now a baby of a different ethnicity, just made it more easily ready to damage the person inside the car, whereas if the demographic of the person outside the car, it would be easier for them to damage them. Now, it's also worth noting that if you try to explain that both of them have the same ethnicity exactly, the model would actually choose not to answer your question. But it's only once you try to say there are different ethnicities, and then the bias becomes more accessible because then the model actually makes a decision based on it.
So now that we know that our model is biased, is there a way to fix this? Is there a way to make the model less biased?
So the question becomes, how is bias introduced to a model in general, right? And bias is basically predominant from the data that the model is trained on. And this data is generated by humans, and humans are by nature biased. And then whatever we have to do is that we have to come up with more data that are less biased, or we have to drop the data that are causing the bias, which is almost impossible, because what makes GPT is the amount of data that went into it. And then, is it actually possible for you to drop half of the data or generate more data that will not be biased, which might be impossible to think about it.
So the large language models are essentially mirroring our own human biases.
Right. So it's like GPT and all generative models. As much as the research will try to sell it, GPT is a completionist model. Given a prior probability of the sentence, it would try to predict what should be the next word or what should be the next token, to use like the sentences that would use in the paper. But at the end of the day, it's just predicting what comes next based on statistics of what it has already seen in training.
Okay, thank you very much for telling me all these interesting things. This was May I AI, and see you in the next episode.